Hi everyone, I'm Georgia, and soon you'll be hearing from Hunter as well. We'd just like to talk a little bit about why we're pursuing the investigation that we're pursuing and what kind of investigation we're going to pursue over this lesson. Um, as part of this lesson plan, we are looking for students to develop kind of an understanding about making informed ideas and their own critical thinking. To do that, we have planned for them to sort of answer some questions about what they think might happen as we go into looking at a fair test. So to make this a fair test, we have decided that there is only one independent variable, and for us, the easiest way to make the variable sort of suitable for the age group and suitable for materials and everything is to make water the variable. So we would have the students try and grow their own plants from leaf propagation and to investigate whether how much more water they would need to grow the plant properly. But Hunter, I think, is going to explain a little bit more about that later on. We think it's important to develop students' understanding of how plants, and in particular succulents, might help the environment, might help animals, and how they might thrive in different situations. And we also aim to sort of interrupt the misconceptions about what students might think plant growth is. And I will hand over to Hunter.
I just need to switch the slides. So the learning intention for our lesson plan is to investigate a native Australian plant and the ability to survive in harsh conditions. So, well, actually, fuck.
So if there's a success criteria, a successful outcome of this investigation would lead to students being able to say that they understand how and why plants need to adapt to their environment, and in particular know and understand how pig-based plants survive in their environments and thrive. I'm change slides.
So the learning intention highlights three key areas of knowledge that we would like to address during the activity. Firstly, the students will have the opportunity to investigate the scientific concept. This strongly links with the Victorian curriculum under the substrand questioning and predicting, as it explains the role of the students will take in their investigation. The students are asked to make predictions based off the knowledge learned prior to their hands-on activity. The second area addressed in the learning intention analyzes the integrity of native Australian plants, whilst the third area addressed focuses on the scientific concept of adaptation. So in the current crisis today concerning climate change, something that has been distressed in the encyclical by the Pope, we thought it was important to uncover the science of adaptation and consider it whilst we reflect on how we can adapt to climate today. So therefore, we thought it was necessary to give students the opportunity to start thinking critically and communicate their ideas on how does something adapt to its environment when in the state for survival. The mission to proliferate this scientific literacy in students is embedded in meaningful experiences and to use critical thinking when grappling ideas to inform decisions.
We chose to sort of focus on Australian plants and their adaptability and survivability, because again, linking to the popes and cyclicals, so sustainability is a really important point and something that's going to become more and more essential for students and students to be more across as we look at ways to adapt our living to provide less of a footprint on the environment.
So what is adaptation? So with the focus being on the peak phase plan, so what is adaptation? The scientific concept that let's do that again. The scientific concept that we are exploring is adaptation, with the focus being on the peak phase plan. According to John Gittelman, adaptation is the biological process where a species becomes fitted to its environment. But what is natural selection? And that's something that we would also have to discover. So a popular theory of natural selection emphasizes that natural desire to reproduce and continue the longevity of the species in an ever-changing environment. This results in the desire to adapt traits, whether it's biologically or behaviorally, to fit the environment and continue its reproduction. Behavioral adaptation can be how emperor penguins crowd together to share warmth, whereas a biological adaptation can be how Tibetans have acclimated to high altitudes for living purposes. So for our activity, the objective for our main activity is to investigate and make predictions on outcomes for their experiment. We decided to group the students up and provide them with an opportunity to work cooperatively and communicate their ideas to each member of the group. So this is collaborative learning, and collaborative learning is beneficial because it fosters social interaction. It also promotes high-level thinking, and it develops problem-solving skills by formulating ideas and discussing them. An analysis found that students with learning disabilities find it difficult to process scientific knowledge, and that they relied on peer supports to facilitate their learning as well. Each group has an assigned independent variable to create disparities in each of the results, and therefore create discussion as to why this is the result. The independent variable is water intake, because it is a major trait explored in the peak phase plant. The duration of the activity will be about 6 weeks. After the hands-on activity is conducted, students will discuss amongst their table about what they think will happen. This will be aided by a worksheet with scaffolded questions. McGrath and Hughes also found that a structured inquiry is effective because teachers can use scaffolded questions that reflect their learning to build that understanding of scientific knowledge. In the future lesson, as soon as they examine their results, they will reflect their understanding of what happened and why did it happen. So this will be part of a discussion later on their paper. Well done.
To elaborate a little bit further about facilitating scaffolding, we have come up with several ways to both scaffold and expand student skills. So in our cohort, it's unreasonable to assume that students will all be at expected levels. So we believe it's really, really important to scaffold those higher learners as well, because often that sort of gets overlooked in terms of we're trying to scaffold the lower learners to bring them up, but less focus seems to have been focused on expansion. So to expand, we have decided to use slightly less scaffolding and slightly more open-ended investigative wording for worksheets provided during the lesson to facilitate those higher learners. And for the lower learners, we have included a little bit more facilitation in terms of clearer wording, sort of more explicit language to facilitate their understanding. Another thing that we thought to do to facilitate learning for lower students was to include images of what we want them to do. So we found that this can be helpful with students, especially with learning difficulties who struggle with task initiation, because a lot of the time verbal instructions get sort of lost with task initiation and students aren't sure what the first step is. So we would make sure to include, that. So in order to appropriately present this, we used a variety of resources. So some we've made ourselves, and some of the rest that we included, we referenced heavily. So because this is a practical experiment, there will be some safety concerns to take into consideration, because we are working with kids. And a lot of students these days do have devices in their classrooms. We would need to make it really, really clear that when watering the plants, we do not water the plants anywhere near our devices or anywhere near sort of any electricity. And because we are using soil, it would be really important for us to make it clear to the students that there are some safety things with soil. So using gloves when you're potting, using sort of tools if you're watering, so using a spoon instead of just tipping lots of water in to your plant. Those kind of safety considerations would be really, really important to discuss with the class before you go ahead and give them the potting mix and the plant to take home. Because they are taking it home, it would also be really important as a safety concern to instruct the students on the best way and place to store their succulents. So an example of that would be inside in a shady area with good drainage. So when you do water it, you're not going to just wet all your tables and ruin everything. Yeah. Included on this slide are ideas in ways in which you could help facilitate the activity with your students.
Yep.
And just things that make it a little bit clearer for students to understand how, and what is expected from them. We would also recommend that the students keep some kind of diary so that when they look at their plant once a week, they are able to note down any changes and any developments with their potted succulent. All right.
So this is just a slide of an example of what you could do in the classroom. So we've decided to take the independent variable of water intake. So each group has a different assigned value, sorry. I'll do that again. So this is just an example of the use of an independent variable in our activity. So ours is water intake, and each group has a different method that they can use it for their procedure across the duration of the experiment, so across the 6 weeks. So one group they'll water the plant every single day, every single school day. One group will water the plant 2 days a week. The other will do every 2 weeks. And the fourth and final group will not water after the initial watering. So that's from day one. They won't water after that.
Interesting. All right. And so here I have some examples of what your plants could look like through the growth process. Can you see my mouse as I'm hovering?
Yeah.
Okay. So this image here that I'm hovering over is an example of what plant looks like when you plant it. You could also have this as your first plant. So 2 leaves, which would lead into what kind of new growth you're looking for and what new growth actually looks like. So if you see just between these leaves, we have a tiny little new growth shoot, and that will eventually grow to be about the same size as the other shoots of the leaves. So in doing this, personally, I watered these once a day with 1 tablespoon of water once a day in the morning, and then I left it in a cool environment. I left it in my study so that I could control the environment that it was in. And these are just some examples of how your plants will look and what you're kind of looking for. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah. Cool. All done.